it warns you now. Okay. So we have a few prepared questions that we're going to ask each speaker to comment on as well. We're going to try to keep this to about a minute. So I know that these are short. Okay, so I'm just going to read through the questions first so that you can kind of prepare your answer. But how do you spend the bulk of your time in your current position? How did you end up in your current position? And then what kinds of collaborations do you have in your current position? And we're going to go through each of these one at a time. And in the same order as before, so you know when your turn is coming. So Dr. Henderson, can you please answer how you spend the bulk of your time in your current position?
Megan, I'm going to hop in. Oh, sorry, Dr. Henderson, to interrupt you. I just briefly wanted to share with everyone that's joined us today that we're very sorry that Dr. Marcos Garcia Ojeda has been unable to join us this morning. And we know that many of you were looking forward to hearing from him and hearing about his experiences at UC Merced. And we will miss him deeply. And if you are excited to connect with Marcos or have some questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to contact one of the moderators. We're all indicated with MOD in front of our names, and we can pass those along to Marcos and ask him to get back to you. So thanks very much.
Awesome. Yeah, so I spend the bulk of my time really mentoring my undergrad students, whether that's through the undergrad students that are helping me with my research projects, or the students that are a part of this program for mastery in engineering studies.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ahmed?
I'd say more recently, I spend the bulk of my time working with other faculty members to come up with programs related to teaching and student learning.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Luoma?
Yeah, I'd say the bulk of my time is really varied. A lot of the time is spent meeting with faculty in consultations, designing and then facilitating workshops for faculty members. I also teach, so I teach a course for graduate students and postdocs called The Theory and Practice of Scientific Teaching. I advise first-year students. I mean, I think one of the favorite things about my job is that I get to do so many different types of things, all within the same position.
Great. Dr. Schmoll?
I would say it's similar to Dr. Luoma. My job is very varied. So what I do most of the time changes throughout the year. Right now, due to COVID, since we haven't been open, I would say most of my time is really administrative stuff. It's been dealing with safety protocols and getting things approved and you know all of that good stuff. But we are starting to reopen. Under normal circumstances, I would say it's fairly evenly split between doing programming and coming up with programming with people and the more administrative side of my job. But it changes. I also teach. I do the programming, I design exhibits, you know, it's a lot and it's a lot of fun. So
great. Dr. Harrison?
Hey, yeah, so to kind of echo everyone else, my job is very varied. So depending on the semester we're looking at, but the main thing that I work on is the labs. That's like my main responsibility. So, you know, that comes with, you know, managing TAs, working on like programmatic development and course development and things like that. And then I'm on, you know, committees and stuff for the college, various committees, do some teaching as well, and then a little bit of research when I can fit it in.
Great, thank you. Okay. Moving on to our second question of how did you end up in your current position? So if you could just talk about the path you took to get to your position.
Yeah. So I started my career at University of Illinois in Urbana as a lecturer. And 5 years ago now, I decided that Illinois was too cold. And so I wanted to move somewhere extreme And so I kind of looked at southern states, and I thought I was going to move back home to North Carolina. But I got an offer here at University of Houston to join their first year engineering program. And I thought it was a cool opportunity. They were, in the past, the first year students had their first couple of courses within their major, and they decided to pull that from the departments and have all of the engineering students go through a common first year experience. So I came down here to join that. And when the chemical engineering department found out I was here, they asked me to start teaching courses there. And they kind of stole me away. So, I still have friends there in the first year program, but I'm most often teaching sophomore level courses. And so we really coordinate the types of things we do. And we really look at how what we're doing in the first year is impacting those students in sophomore year. And believe it or not, there are lots of programs out there about first year engineering retention, et cetera. But we happen to lose many of our students in the second year when they're taking those first courses in their major. And so we're trying to figure out ways to bridge the gap there.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ahmad, could you please answer the same question?
So I, as I mentioned in my intro, I was an ARACTA postdoc, and that program has a requirement where you team with the local teaching institution. In my case, it was Pima Community College, and teach a course. And I ended up teaching more than one course, and they hired me as an adjunct faculty member and then as a full-time faculty member. And with respect to the Teaching and Learning Center, it's something that I guess since I got to Pima, I had been looking for ways to learn more about teaching and to improve my teaching. And I worked with a group of faculty members to put together a proposal to start a college-wide teaching and learning center, which we did. And so that's how I ended up doing this dual appointment of teaching and learning and also teaching in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Loma, can you please answer the question?
Sure. My journey really starts back to when I was a graduate student. And so getting to be involved with our teaching center as a graduate student, we had this group of 20 McDougall graduate teaching fellows where we would facilitate workshops for our peers on effective learning strategies and teaching strategies. That experience gave me the opportunity to grow and learn about educational development, such that my last year of graduate school, I was one of the coordinators that led that team of 20. And so when I was graduating, I was able to essentially cold email our executive director and say, I really love this work. Are there any opportunities available? It was kind of an alignment of the stars that some grants had just come into our center for a few different STEM education initiatives. And so I was able to jump right in and go from a part-time to a full-time position at our center. And then since then have been able to move around our teams a little bit. So transitioning from the STEM education program director position to kind of broadening out and still doing some STEM focused work, but really thinking more broadly about education development across all disciplines. So that's my role now on the faculty teaching initiatives team.
Thank you. Dr. Schmoll, could you please talk about how you got in your position?
Sure. So I think I'm going to go back all the way to undergrad now. And so I started teaching. I was a TA my senior year of undergrad. I did a lot of teaching in the summertime with summer camp groups. And a lot of that involved the planetarium, and I would do planetarium shows. And so, like I said, when I got to grad school, the planetarium was part of my decision, not the only part of my decision, but it definitely factored into where I decided to go. And I was along the way also found out about the museum studies program at U of M and asked my advisors in astronomy if I could do it, and they said no. And then they realized pretty quickly that I was much happier teaching, and they supported me in doing museum studies. I was able to do an internship at the Adler Planetarium, and when I was finishing up my dissertation, the job here at Abrams opened up, and everyone sent it to me. Anyone who saw it sent it my way. And I applied and didn't hear back and accepted a different job as a STEM education specialist at the Field Museum. So doing more museum-based work instead. And a month after I moved to Chicago, they're like, oh, would you like to interview for this job at Abrams? And I said, I just moved, but things worked out in the end. It took them about a year to figure it out. My job was a year in Chicago, so it worked out in the end. So here I am.
Perfect. Dr. Harrison?
Yeah, so I kind of, at some point in my grad school career, I realized I wanted to move in a more teaching focused path. So when I was starting to apply for positions after grad school, I was really focused on DBER postdoc positions. So I applied to a few all over the place and then ended up at San Francisco State for my postdoc and really learned a lot, like crazy amount in that like year and a half I was actually ended up being there. But always kind of like in the back of my mind knew that I kind of wanted to be back in Atlanta at some point. So anytime, positions were opening in Atlanta is something I was looking for. And something related, very teaching focused. And this position opened up at Georgia Tech. And I happened to know someone who worked at Georgia Tech, so talked to them a little bit about the position and realized it would be a really nice fit for what I wanted to do. So ended up getting into this position. And it's a lot easier to live in Georgia Tech on a salary than it is in San Francisco. So that definitely played a role in my decision to move. It is about 3 times less as expensive to live here than it is in San Francisco, even though San Francisco is a really cool city. But I'm very happy in my current position now.
Great, thank you. Okay. Sonia, do you want to introduce?
Sure, happy to. We are pleased that Dr. Marcos Garcia Ojeda has been able to join us. Dr. Marcos, we would ask if you would like to unmute yourself and spend a minute or two telling us a little bit about your position and kind of how you bring your core values to your work. And then Megan has popped up on the slide a couple of minutes that the other panelists, a few questions that the other panelists have just answered, kind of giving a sense of what does their workload look like and what are they enjoying about their work. So if you would give us a brief intro and then answer questions 1 and 2 here, that would be super. We're so glad that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologize for being late. I by mistake put it for next Thursday. Calendar failed. So thank you, Dax, for fetching me out of my hole. I would have not been here without Dax helping me. So I am an associate teaching professor at the University of California, Merced. I didn't start it in this position when I came to Merced. I was actually a research position doing stem cell biology. So I had a lab. I had grad students, PhD students doing research in transplantation immunology and stem cells. And then my spouse got cancer. So Merced was new. I am founding faculty. So the university has only been here for 15 years. And at the time my spouse got cancer, he only could get treatment in Sacramento, which is 2 hours away from Merced. So for about 6 months, I was driving back and forth from Merced to Sacramento for the chemotherapy that my spouse was having. And as you may imagine, that 4 hours on the road is not conducive for somebody writing grants and being able to maintain a research lab. So I have always had a passion for teaching and wanted to do better. So when the opportunity came for me to put for my tenure, instead of going through the research faculty, my mentors and advocators basically said, you know what, it may be easier for you to take a teaching faculty position because you have been doing great on that. And the issue with the family, it's impair you from publishing and getting the grants that you needed to do. So that's how I became a teaching faculty. As a teaching faculty right now, I primarily teach, but that's not the only thing that I do. I currently have an HMI grant that I am a co-PI with Dr. Manilai and Dr. Vister Jones at UC Merced. And my bulk of the training with the grant is training faculty on inclusive pedagogy. So for example, in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be leading a summer institute here at UC Merced with Stanley Law and deaf peers, and Christy is going to be one of our facilitators. So it's actually really good to do that. So I have been spending my entire summer planning this institute. The other thing that I do, I have led some faculty learning communities at UC Merced, and because of my interest in teaching and being part of SABER, I had started to learn how to become a biology education scientist, which was something new. I never knew anything about it until I switched to my teaching position. So in that regard, that's how I spend most of my time, mentoring students at UC Merced, mentoring faculty during their pedagogy, and doing research on how the classroom environment influences student performance. That's what I'm doing currently now. And I think that may have been a good summary of what I do.
That was perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move into this third question now, and we're going to start back at the top for our panelists. So we're asking what kinds of collaborations you do in your current position. So Dr. Henderson, if you'd like to start.
Yeah. So most of my collaborations are research collaborations, whether that be faculty from other institutions or faculty here at UH. I have a couple of projects and like I said, so these are research collaborations. There's a bit of collaboration with folks here in the community. I co-founded an after-school program for underrepresented kids and their families. It's all about STEM and hands-on learning. And so collaborating with some of the school districts here, but our program manager and grad students, they lead those efforts, but that's another type of collaboration.
Great, thank you. Dr. Ahmad?
So it varies. I collaborate with faculty members at my institution and other institutions on questions related to teaching and learning. And I also collaborate with students who are interested in researching stress and trauma and their effect on learning and well-being. And more recently, I've started collaborating with some community members on the issue of mental health and how to support students and faculty with respect to mental health.
Great, thank you. Dr. Garcia, Huerta?
So I have multiple collaborations going on. I still have a lot of expertise in immunology. So I collaborate with some of my colleagues doing experiments that required fluorescence activated cell sorting. So I still, ever so often, there's a little paper that comes out with my name because of that. So I still keep my immunology going. But my primary collaborations are with colleagues that are doing biology education research. So I have collaborators in Minnesota and at University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities and at UC Merced. And I belong to a network that originated with Sehoya Kotner in Minnesota called EduSTEM that have members all over the nation. So the other thing that we have is collaboration with the Center for Engaged Teaching and Learning to allow the training of the faculty on pedagogy. So those are my main collaborations.
Thank you. Dr. Loma?
As I mentioned before, I think collaboration is just one of the top values for me professionally, and it's almost everything I do is collaboration within our teaching center. So Within our team, I'm on a team of 4, the faculty teaching initiatives team. When we're doing consultation, we'll often circle back to each other. If I encounter this situation that the faculty member is struggling with, what do you think? What resources are available? We may be collaborating to put together a workshop. So that happens within our team. We also have a large center, so there are many other teams within it. And one of my favorite things to do right now is to collaborate with our educational technology team. So we're offering a workshop series, for instance, on academic continuity that is allowing instructors to think about, okay, well, I learned how to teach on Zoom. I learned how to do all of this remote learning. How am I going to bring that back as we transition back to the in-person learning? What lessons have I learned that I can now implement? And then there are collaborations beyond our center. So working with our registrar's office to think about the Yale syllabus and what recommendations we can provide to faculty as they're creating those syllabi, encouraging them to talk about diversity, to be welcoming, to think about anti-racist pedagogy, all of those things as the syllabus comes together. And then of course, collaborations beyond Yale too, through some of our professional organizations, like the POD network, which is for educational developers. So collaboration all across the board.
Great. Dr. Schmoll?
Yeah, so I have a lot of different collaborations at different scales. So the Big Astronomy Project, for instance, that's a major NSF grant, and that is a collaboration between us, other planetariums such as Ward Beecher Planetarium and Peoria Riverfront Museum, but also Astronomy Society of the Pacific, Associated Universities Incorporated, and California Academy of Sciences. So it's a really big collaboration with big organizations across the country in order to make that one happen. But we also collaborate with folks more locally for different types of programming or grant projects. So the MSU Museum, our the Broad Art Museum at MSU, we have a local science center called Impression 5, libraries. And then we also work with faculty to use a planetarium to teach a bunch of different topics. So we've worked with art history and design, art history design, the Department of English, the foreign language departments. We've been trying to start a collaboration there, our communication arts and sciences, which includes the School of Journalism. So a lot of, and that's just some of it. So we work with folks on campus and beyond to work with both MSU students and the general public. So always collaborating. I never say no.
That's great. Dr. Harrison?
Yeah, so collaboration is a wildly important part of my job. So most of our classes here at Georgia Tech are team taught. So that's one area of collaboration through the actual teaching process. But then within biology education research, that's really how I get everything done, is being able to collaborate with different people. So I have undergrads that work with me. I also collaborate with some colleagues around the city of Atlanta. I'm also part of the CC BioInsights program. So it's working with community college faculty to collaborate on various research projects and things like that. And then one of my favorite collaborations that I have is through our biolabs, our intro biolabs for our students. We actually work with the Atlanta Botanical Gardens to do actual real research within our intro biolabs. So we work with them. This past year, we worked on a project looking at this endangered species of plants and looking at the microbiome of that plant to see how that affected growth and development and things like that. So lots of different areas and ways in which collaboration is really important for my position, and definitely couldn't do it without that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to switch to the open Q&A, and I think if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask to our panelists, please either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
I can also go ahead and get started with, we sent out a survey where all of the attendees were able to send in some questions. So I could just get us started and then by asking some questions, and then everyone else can kind of raise their hand and put additional questions in the chat. So I thought I would follow up kind of on the collaboration question. And we have someone who asked, how do you recommend actually establishing departmental collaborations, either within or outside of your department? And then I suppose we could just follow the same format and kind of go down from the top of the list like we were before.
Yes, hold on a sec. What?
Thank you,
Got it.
Megan, for being a wonderful slide operator. We appreciate it.
The problem is every time I click out of Zoom, they're like, you can't go back in now. Okay, we're ready. Dr. Henderson.
Yeah, I'll just give maybe one pointer or two, since we have lots of panelists that we'll be able to address. I've been pretty lucky, I would say, because I hear horror stories about collaborations. But I like to always start with, the ideas, and finding folks with similar interests and just having conversations about, before we make any commitments, just conversations. Let's say if it's a NSF project idea, and also being clear with folks like, hey, I have this idea. Are you interested in collaboration? These are the ways that I would love for you to contribute. And then they decide whether to agree or not. So one example, I'm working on a NSF proposal now, and one of the collaborators and I had to have a discussion about his level of participation and whether it made sense to submit this as a collaborative type of proposal between two institutions, or whether he would be at the sub-awardee level. And so I think just being very clear with folks about, especially if it's your idea, being clear about where you need them to contribute. That's been helpful for me, and just having those conversations. Sometimes in conversation, you'll be able to weed people out before you even make an ask.
Dr. Ahmad?
Yeah, I would say, so I try to spend time to get to know the person or persons, and also to give them a chance to get to know me. Because for me, I want to know that, this is someone I get along with before I start doing professional work with. And so usually there's an interest, a common interest. I hear them talk about what they're passionate about or questions they're interested in. And I don't jump to say, oh, there is a collaboration opportunity right away. I want to hear more. I want to learn more about that individual as as my fellow human being, and then go from there. Talk about that I have a common interest, and here is why, and offer opportunities or ask them for opportunities to collaborate. And I would say I do that whether it's faculty members or working with students.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia, I see that you kind of put a comment in the chat, but feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, collaboration, communication is key to be able to be in the same plane, especially understanding how somebody's work ethic may jive or not with yours. I have successful people that I collaborate because they understand how I work, and they could be tolerant of my little idiosyncrasies. So in that way, I also encourage people that when they're going to collaborate, to be open and tolerant of everybody's way of working. Not everybody works the same way that you do. And sometimes that could be a cause of frustration. So when you have that communication, you get to learn about those ways of people working, and therefore it lowers the amount of frustration that you have, because you know that they're going to get the work done, maybe not in your same schedule. And that helps immensely to keep things in a good working relationship.
Thank you. Dr. Luoma?
I really appreciate what the other panelists have said so far about getting to know other people. I guess in my mind, I think about it as the pre-collaboration, that sometimes, I think this is true for career exploration too, reaching out to people just in an informational sense to find out more about their work and their interests sometimes opens doors you might not have imagined. So I can think of those conversations going two ways, that sometimes that's opened up an opportunity for me where I think, oh, that person would be really great for this project that I wasn't even thinking about. I discovered a new interest, and to make the connection. Or conversely, someone may reach out to me and have learned something about me and pull me in on a project. So I think kind of the groundwork for establishing fruitful collaborations is just having a love of people and getting to know each other first.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. Dr. Schmoll?
Yeah, I would say ditto to like pretty much everything that everyone has said so far in terms of getting to know people. I think I would maybe take a step back, and how do you get to that point of having those conversations is early on. I'm learning to say no more these days for my own mental health. But in the beginning, I have served on committees. I've gone to meetings, I've gone to presentations or conferences and things like that in order to start learning about other people, to have those conversations in the first place. So I think that's one thing is don't burn yourself out for sure, but definitely take advantage of those different opportunities so you can have those conversations. On the other side of things, I do have somewhat of an advantage in that I work at a planetarium and lots of people want to come and hang out here. So I do invite people out to my building just to show them what we can do, because a lot of people don't realize that the planetarium can be helpful for teaching a lot of different things outside of astronomy. And so if I can show them what we've done, it's more likely to spark ideas down the road, and then they'll come back to me, or I'll think of them and invite them on a collaboration. So inviting people to your space to show them how you can support them is also a good way.
Great, thank you. Dr. Harrison?
Yeah, so I found that a lot of so I've been in my position for about 5 years now, and I found that a lot of my like early collaboration that I was doing was really more based on previous relationships that I had made before my job. But as I've been in this position longer, and like people have seen kind of what my expertise is in the position, that's when people have started to reach out to me for collaboration stuff. And so I would say part of it is just kind of establishing what your kind of niche is, almost like what your specialty is, and then people will recognize that, right? And will recognize that you're an expert in that area and that you have a lot of things to bring from that perspective, which can lead to further collaboration down the road. And yeah, you have to get good at saying no in certain situations. I've definitely found that I am at that point where I'm like, all right, I need to start saying no to stuff because I'm a little bit stretched a little bit too far. So yeah, it's easy to say yes early on in your career, but then you kind of have to start to limit yourself, I would say, a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think we have time for one more question that I'm going to take from the chat. Everyone else's questions, please feel free to take those with you to the breakout rooms. Well, we get to talk to our panelists a little bit longer. It doesn't end in 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and read off Dimitri's question. Can you provide more examples of how you collaborate with undergraduates? I'm particularly interested in collaborations between graduate students and undergraduates.
Yeah, so again, because I've most of my career been an instructional faculty, and I really believe in exposing undergrad students to opportunities for research. My collaborations with undergrad students have typically been as undergrad research assistants, and so I enjoy spending time teaching them about engineering education, which many of these are hardcore lab-based chemical engineers and other engineering majors. And to hear about this field that's education, and we think about engineering problems, they really get excited about that. So a lot of my time is spent training them in those ways. And then whenever I have opportunities, job opportunities for hiring my undergrads, so for the after-school program, I try to hire as many engineering students as I can for that program. So collaborating with them in those ways. But on the instructional side, they're super smart, but I have to spend time with them on how to communicate these STEM concepts to now 4th and 5th graders. And so those are 2 examples there.
Thank you. Dr. Ahmad?
So I try to right from the beginning to empower the students to come with their own research questions. So I talk about what interests me and what questions I have, and then just ask them to, what is it that you want to research related to anything in biology? And usually that, and if I have more than one, then we have discussion. And so it's a generative process. And what that does oftentimes is really brings to the forefront questions that I had not been considering. So I want it to be collaborative to that as much as possible, and to not let my, I suppose my interests, only my interests lead the process. So.
Thank you.
So being a teaching professor gets me in contact with a lot of undergrads who are eager to do research. And when it comes to graduate students, I always try to ensure that I have a mature grad students that I can actually pair with an undergrad. I try, if I can, to avoid having a new grad student who is already learning the ways and probably have too much in their own hands by having to do research and classes together, plus most likely TAing. That person has a plate full. So a more advanced graduate student who already maybe have passed their qualifying exams and maybe is not teaching, or if it's teaching, they can then are able to mentor undergrad. But for example, I have learning assistants in my microbiology class. I have one that I take every year, and we just wrote a paper in which the grad student was the first author, the learning assistant was the second author, and I was the last author. And it was a really successful collaboration. Everybody benefited from working together. The undergrad got some really great skills on how to do qualitative data analysis and coding. And we were able to put a publication that we felt really proud of. And of course, now this undergrad has a publication that helps them in their CV, and the grad student has the can put in their CV that they also have mentored someone in the publication process. So that helps a lot.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Loma?
So our teaching center serves kind of all populations within the community. So we're serving faculty, we're serving postdocs, we're serving graduate students, we're serving undergraduates. And I think something we're getting better at is making sure we bring all those voices to the table when we think about a particular project. So I've had the privilege of being able to hire a few undergraduate students over the years for our various projects. I have one working with us this summer, and she has been instrumental as we've thought about this syllabus project. So not only do we have administrators at the table and faculty focus groups who are giving us feedback, we're also able to bring in some student voices to consider how it sits and reads with someone who's currently in the midst of the student experience as we think about the framing. So that's been really, really valuable. So I'll say that within our center, at least, we have a little bit less of the graduate student, undergraduate student mentorship relationship. We might provide certain programs about that in terms of fostering those relationships external to our center, but it's more so about incorporating all of those voices around our various initiatives.
Great, thank you. Dr. Schmoll?
Yeah, so we work with undergraduates in a few different ways. So first, on grant projects, so we do have a research assistant who's an undergraduate on the big astronomy project, for instance. We've also have folks on our various other grant projects taking on different roles. For instance, one is a label writer. We're about to hire a video production on another grant, and so on. So that's one thing I would encourage is to build into your grants, and once you start applying, pay for students so that you can also make sure that students can participate by paying them for their work. So we work with them on a mentorship in terms of learning the different aspects of education, be it research or informal label writing or things like that. We also hire undergraduate students as our presenters. And so we have them, we kind of give them the responsibility on the weekend shows. And so we also encourage them to make their own shows and things that they care about and that they're passionate about. And then lastly, we've also worked with faculty with entire classes of students over the course of a semester or two, where they're maybe making exhibits for us or helping us with our various programming as part of their education to become teachers or science communicators and so on.
Great, thank you. Dr. Harrison?
Yeah, so I work with undergrads on research projects, so biology education research. It's actually a really good way to get students involved in research, especially since it's something that they can often do. Like, they don't have to be on campus necessarily to work on the projects and things like that. They can work on them in their own time. Leads a lot of flexibility for students that may not, maybe working or doing other things at other times, so that they're able to still get involved in the research process. So I work with students through that. And I actually just submitted a paper with several undergrad students. So they get the opportunity to do some writing and stuff related to that way. I also have undergrad TAs that I work with that I definitely consider collaborators on the educational process. So work with undergrad TAs on like professional development and stuff related to teaching for my lab courses that we actually run. So all the sections are partially staffed by undergrad teaching assistants.
Great, thank you. I think we're at time for panelists, so I think we're going to transition into the next part. Sonia?
I think Dax is going to walk us through that.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
All right, first off, round of applause for our panelists. You can unmute. Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are so grateful for your time and your thoughtfulness and just sharing a little bit about your position. And we're looking forward to jumping into breakout rooms where we can have more intimate conversations, ask maybe questions that for the big audience you maybe not feel comfortable with, but would like to know. And I posted a link in the chat for our post-event survey. So if you are not attending breakout rooms, please take a moment to fill that out. Your feedback, your input's more than welcome, and we'll use that to plan for next year's event and make it even better. So again, just a heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists for this discussion, and we look forward to continuing the conversation in breakout rooms. For those of you who might have missed it at the beginning, we're the DBER-SiT Professional Development Committee, and we're dedicated to providing DBER scholars in training with opportunities to hone their professional skills to better prepare for our next steps in our career. All right, and so learn more on our DBER-SiT website, and I will post the link to the breakout room and give an overview about breakout room etiquette once we're there. So we're gonna have a 10-minute break before then. And each panelist will be in each breakout room for about 10 to 12 minutes, and we'll rotate the panelists through all the breakout rooms. So we'll have smaller groups with one-on-one conversations with the panelists. And we'll have kind of the same format where participants can ask questions, and we have some backup questions prepared. If you do leave the breakout room, we'll have a homeroom just if you would like to chat with someone about your own career choices and process. All right, and as Liz posted in the chat, the breakout session will start at 1:20 Eastern, which is 10:20 Pacific, I think.
Yes.
And the link to the breakout room is in the chat. Again, we will open that room at 1:20 Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
I think we can stop recording now.
Yeah. Sorry, I have to find where that is.